We will call the April 25th, 2024 Insurance and Benefits Committee to order. Susan, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Boyd. Here. Amber Brown. Suzette Couples. Mike Curtis.
Here.
Holly Deering. Brian Gaither. Mary Hickerson. Lois Miller. Commissioner McAdoo. Commissioner Phillips. Michael Smith. Steve Spence. Sonia Stevenson. Eric Tutobeni.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair, have you had an opportunity to review the minutes of the previous meeting? Yes, sir. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? We have multiple seconds. Susan, you can pick one. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes stand approved. Item number 3, we don't have public comments. Molly, you're up with financials because the esteemed and venerable Ed Elam is not with us today, as you can tell. So you take it away. Thank you.
For the 264 fund for the months of March, we had $2,202,193 in revenue, $1,465,320 in expenses. Revenue less expenses came to $736,872. For calendar year to date, total that came to $5,707,940 in revenue. $4,627,214 in expenses, revenue less expenses, $1,080,726. The fiscal year-to-date total for revenue is $17,028,868. In expenses, $15,965,853. In revenue less expenses, $1,063,015. For the 266 report for the month of March in workers' comp, we had $793.78 in claims. For OJI, $119,107.63. For total claims for March, that's $119,901.41. The year-to-date total on workers' comp came to $6,710.15 for OJI, $496,119.12 for the total claims year-to-date. That's $502,829.27.
Thank you, Molly. Any questions for Molly regarding the financial report? Yes, Mary, you're recognized.
I have a question, and I'm glad Michael just come in. On the, you always report at the bottom of the 264 account about the OPEB. Mm-hmm. Because we split, Michael, is this going to quit updating at the bottom of the chart, or how often? The last one we have is June 30, 22. Do we have a number for June 30, 23, or is that something that's like 6, 8, 9 months behind being able to post something?
You're recognized, Michael Smith.
We have one at the end of every fiscal year, and there is one for the end of 6/30/2023 that was released as of January 24, so a couple months ago. But we'll still have an OPEB study every. It'll excuse me. It'll significantly reduce in total, and if you'll notice. It reduced quite a bit in 2022, and then 2023 it'll reduce even further. But I bet it looks like it just hasn't been updated.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we need to approve the report. Chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? We have a second. Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Boyd. Yes. Suzette Couples. Yes. Mike Curtis. Yes. Brian Gaither. Yes. Mary Hickerson. Yes. Lois Miller. Yes. Commissioner McAdoo. Yes. Commissioner Phillips. Yes. Michael Smith. Yes. Steve Spence. Yes. Sonia Stevenson. Yes. Eric Tutobeni.
Yes. Thank you. Motion's approved. Item 5, excuse me, OSHA report. Susan?
For the OSHA report for March 2024, we had 19 incidences. That brings our calendar year-to-date total to 59. Of those 59, there was 42 OSHA recordable with 8 lost day claims, 30 restricted day claims, and 4 OSHA or other recordables. On the next page, you'll see our year-to-date claims for 2024 at 59 compared to 2023 at 71, and 2022 at 46. The next page is the incurred dollars. For 2024 year-to-date is $272,000. 2023 was $268,000, and 2022 was $160,000. And the last page is the breakdown of the 19 claims. There was 10 at the Board of Ed and 9 at County General, and of the 9 at County General, there was 1 at EMS, 1 at Fire, 1 at the Juvenile Detention Center, 1 at PAWS, and 5 at the Sheriff's Department. And that concludes the OSHA report.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any questions for Susan regarding the OSHA report? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion to approve. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor of approving the OSHA report say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion stands approved.
I do have one more thing. Mary had asked to bring back information on the open workers' comp claims. We have a total of 12 that are still have medical ability to see the doctor. There's 5 that are currently open, 7 that have not sought treatment within the last year, so they are currently in a closed status. You're welcome.
Thank you, Susan. Item 6 on the agenda is our wellness update from our wellness update coordinator. And please welcome Vinnie Black. Come forward, Mr. Black, and introduce yourself to the committee. Welcome aboard. Thank you for being here.
And so I'm the new well-being coordinator from Cigna, and so I'm replacing Liz in her role. And so I'm coming to the end of my training with Cigna here soon, and so looking forward to getting out, meeting these departments, meeting department heads, administrators, and really learning about the county from the ground up. I've learned a lot already just from our reporting at Cigna, some strategies, what we can do differently. Liz did a terrific job, so really want to kind of take the ball and run with what she was doing, but really see what else can we do and learn about your employees and their needs. So looking forward to just getting with y'all and hearing from the different department heads around the county and learning about what their employees need, what we can do better for them. So we have the wellness numbers here for March 2024, and so we have it reported out from October to March last year, and then October to March 23-24, so you can see a little comparison there. And so just to highlight, overall, our individuals meeting that 3-point wellness goal did go down from 280 to 243, but our overall annual physicals went up from 356 to 384. And then wanted to point out just colon cancer screenings and prostate exams, those are holding fairly steady. Obviously, without someone at the helm as a well-being coordinator for the past few months, I would expect to see some of those lower numbers there, just not that person getting out there and really pushing these different things and pushing these different initiatives around the county. So that's your March report. We have the year up-to-date numbers, so you can see that comparison there. Are there any questions regarding that report?
Any questions for Mr. Black? Seeing none? We do have one question.
Mr. Black, welcome aboard and move to approve.
We have a motion to approve and to accept. I didn't think so. But nonetheless, the commissioner wants to approve it. The chair is going to approve it. That's the prerogative of the chair, is it not? So I think that the chair is going to exercise his prerogative and accept the motion from the commissioner. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor of approving say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Motion to approve was to welcome Mr. Black.
It's all approved now, Commissioner.
First of its kind.
He's certainly worth our approval. Would you not say so? I think so. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Black. Thank you very much. Item 7, property coverage insurance. Susan, you're up.
Okay, for the renewal for property and casualty and liability insurance for 2024-25 fiscal year, our property values are at $2,254,526,527, which is an increase of 15%, and that is based off of our annual appraisals. Our contents at $132,462,243, which is an increase of about 10%. That includes the new voting machines that the Election Commission purchased, additional computer equipment. We have 4 new buildings that were added, including 2 of the public safety and health buildings. We have 400 buildings at 134 locations that are insured, 885 vehicles at a value of $58 million. We currently have 371 contracted buses. They did decrease the liability on the renewal on the buses from $5 million to $1.5 million this year. We had a lot of carriers that are concerned or have about the Middle Tennessee storm activity, which continues to show an increase in the premiums. We have a high density of concentrated values with 7 locations having over $100 million in values at just those locations. We did explore the Tennessee Risk Pool and the Tennessee County Service Association, which declined to quote. Our RFP was out to market for 57 days. And Janet Cook is here to go over the premiums and the marketing.
I have a question for you on your report. You said we had 4 buildings, 2 of which were public safety buildings. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us, the committee, what the other 2 buildings are?
The other one was the new building at 814 South Church that was purchased by the school, and then the addition on the insurance for the building at on Las Casas Pike for the fire department.
Excellent. Thank you. Before we move forward, any questions about the report? Okay. Come on forward. Thank you. Please introduce yourself for the record, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Cook with CCMSI. We are your broker and third-party administrator, so we handle the OJI and property casualty claims. As Ms. Thompson mentioned, we did take this out to market, and I think you have in front of you all the different carriers that we went to. I want to kind of go over, first off, on the kind of break it down for you a little bit on the property. It is at a 15% increase as far as exposure. Ms. Thompson mentioned building and contents. The difference there is about $307,586,811. The inland marine and mobile equipment, we had a difference increase of $632,541, or 8% increase. The expiring property rate was .1152 per 100 of total insured value. The renewal rate is .32 per 100, so again, at 15% kind of overall. On the casualty, the rating base on that is for the vehicles, the expiring was 857, the renewal is 885, so it was 28 difference, or 3%. The values for the vehicles as far as physical damage was at expiring $49,467,200, and the renewal was at $58,087,825. So the difference there was $8,620,625, or 17%. The general operating budget is, again, how the casualty exposure is rated. The expiring was $778,217,862. The renewal was at $849,809,602. So the difference there was $71,591,740, or a 9% increase. The number of employees is also a rating base. The expiring was 7,441. The renewal was 7,845, or 404, so it was 5% increase. As far as the Board of Education, the number of students is a rating base. The expiring was 48,244. The renewal was at 50,716. So the difference there was 2,472, or 5%. All of the expiring companies that you had are actually the ones that quoted for the renewal. So on the property, Travelers, with the expiring premium of $2,392,402, the renewal premium is at $3,161,794. On the package policy, which is with Princeton, that's your auto liability, general liability, public officials. The expiring premium was $866,150, and the renewal premium is at $1,068,845. On the auto physical damage, that was with Hanover. Your expiring premium was $117,758. Your renewal premium is $129,039. On the law enforcement liability, the first layer on the law enforcement is with Greenwich, and the expiring premium was $459,115. The renewal premium was $463,275. And then we have an excess above the law enforcement to bring that up to a $5 million limit with Kensaw, and the expiring premium was $210,960, and the renewal premium is $221,506. On the cyber liability, it's with Homeland. The expiring was $55,000. The renewal quote was $55,450. On the crime insurance, it was with Travelers. The expiring premium was $5,658. The renewal premium is actually down $5,460. The dental professional is with Admiral. The expiring premium was $6,245, and the renewal premium is $7,081. And then we've got Axis with the firefighters' accident coverage, and the expiring premium was $4,182, and that was also the renewal premium, so no difference in that. I just kind of want to go through all of the different companies that this was marketed to. On the package, which again is going to consist of your general liability, auto liability, your law enforcement, and public officials liability, we sent that out to 11 different markets. And I think you have in your packet kind of the status of where they were at and the reason why they declined to quote. And it's kind of all across the board. Some didn't respond at all. Some responded that it was just too big, that they didn't like the jail exposure, excessive loss experience, no appetite to write Board of Education. So again, different explanations, but it was marketed to 11 different companies. On the property, we marketed to 5 different companies, and I'll just tell you, most of that is going to be based on the large values. Anytime you get into the billions of dollars of total insured values, that makes a lot of companies nervous. And then, as Ms. Thompson mentioned, also, Tennessee has, for some reason, kind of become more of a mecca, if you will, for tornadoes, and that's really got underwriters excited. On the auto physical damage, we marketed that to 3 different companies. We had 1 quote, and then the others 2 declined with no explanation. Crime was sent out to 2 companies, Travelers, your incumbent, and then Great American. They had written the county years ago, but they did not respond. And then on the cyber liability, that went out to 6 markets, and we actually were blocked on 2 markets. We had a market to decline. We had one of the carriers come back and say their minimum premium was $100,000, so they were not going to offer a quote, and then 1 company did not respond at all. But if you recall last year, during the RFP process, we brought a lot of different carriers on the cyber liability and quoted. And a lot of times when you get into a cycle where you're bidding over and over and over again, which we know by law you have to do that, companies just don't want to take the time to go back and quote. It's a lot of time, a lot of resources are involved when they're quoting on a risk, and a lot of times if they know it's bidding every single year, they just will not quote on it. So we unfortunately get involved with that.
I have a question.
Sure.
If this is a pause. Mm-hmm. You referenced a few minutes ago one of the reasons that I think I heard you right, and that we didn't receive a quote was because of excessive claims. Is that is that arbitrary, or is there a standard by which that is measured so that that is ascertained? In other words, is that an arbitrary thing by each of the carriers when they bid, or how's that determined?
Yeah, that's a good-
excessive claims.
Sure. That's a good question. The market back years ago would basically look anywhere from 3 to 5 years from a loss standpoint. Now, insurance companies are going back to kind of the beginning of time. Like when they asked for, and this is not just one company, it's every company, they came back and they said, we want the history back for 20 years. Well, anytime they're looking at a history for 20 years, there's been, a lot of change in the committees. There's been mayoral changes or county executive changes, you name it. And so you're just, it's not really fair. But they pretty much make the decision that that's what they want to look at. So,
If I could interrupt,
Sure.
if you don't mind, I'm sorry, but I'm not trying to be argumentative. But as the county becomes more informed and educated about how it can manage its resources to mitigate claims, are you telling me we're not being rewarded for those efforts because those efforts may have only taken place in the last 5 years or 10 years as opposed to 20 or 30 years ago? So you're telling me that those efforts to mitigate excessive claims are not being considered when they
No.
make that statement?
No, they absolutely would be considered, yes. It's just, there's just been a lot of activity. So what we do is we send them that encompasses all the losses, but then they also break it down by kind of the target point is $100,000 and above in the claims. And so they're looking at how the activity is on those claims that are $100,000 and above. So right now, and they'll look at it by year, by fiscal years, how we break it out for them. So right now, we've got 64 open claims that are $100,000 and greater. Well, that's of great concern to underwriters. As those continue, Mayor, or Mr. Carr, they will look at those as the frequency and severity lessens, then absolutely they will come back and reward the county for that. But right now, the growth with the county, the exposure, and the losses, it's a kind of a triple whammy as far as companies are involved.
Mr. Todabini, you're recognized. Please use your mic. Thank you.
Piggybacking off of Mayor Carr's question, so would you say that they're looking at a trend line then to see claims going down?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry. Please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I didn't want to forget the question before you got too further along into your report.
No, sir, that's all I have.
Oh, okay.
If I could.
Yes, please. Susan, you're recognized.
There is 2 additional premiums to vote on today, in addition to what Janet mentioned, and that's the Safety National Surety Bond that we're required to have for our workers' comp claims. It's at $5,000, and then our broker fee of $46,350. So you'll see that on your exhibit. Just want to make sure that was
Susan,
noted in
when
the
we bring these up, do we need to vote on them separately?
altogether.
Okay, thank you. Janet, do you have anything else?
No.
Any questions for Janet? We have a motion we have a motion to approve. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Susan, if you'll call the roll. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Boyd? Yes. Suzette Couples? Yes. Mike Curtis? Yes. Brian Gaither? Yes. Mary Hickerson? Yes. Lois Miller? Yes. Commissioner McAdoo? Yes. Commissioner Phillips? Yes. Michael Smith? Yes. Steve Spence? Yes. Sonia Stevenson? Yes. Eric Tutobeni? Yes.
Thank you. Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Employer benefit rates for 2025, item 8. Molly?
For the 2025 plan year, the Insurance and Risk Management Department's recommending a 0% rate increase for active and pre-Medicare medical rates. We have not yet received the post-Medicare, post-65 Cigna Medicare Advantage rates from Cigna, so we expect to receive those in the next few weeks. Dental and vision rates for 2025 would stay at a 0% increase. The deductible and out-of-pocket amounts Right now, we're expecting those to stay the same as 2024 unless we receive an update from the IRS mandating a change on that, and that could come in the summer or the fall. We would put information out on that once we receive that.
Is that it?
Gallagher was going to come up and help us walk through our stop-loss options. I think Marissa's
I
on her
tell
way
you
up
what,
now.
want to go ahead and vote on this now?
One thing at a
Excellent.
time. All right.
That's right, you can just go ahead and make your way. We're going to just, we have, we need a motion to approve the report? Thank you, Michael. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Commissioner Boyd? Suzette Couples? Mike Curtis? Brian Gaither? Mary Hickerson? Lois Miller? Commissioner McAdoo? Commissioner Phillips? Michael Smith? Steve Spence? Sonia Stevenson? Eric Tutto-Benny?
Thank you. Motion stands approved. Now we're to stop loss with Mrs. Combs-Smith. Gallagher, now you can present. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think on your agenda items that were included in your packet, there's a statement of the amount of premium at the different attachment points. We quoted with Cigna on the embedded stop loss, which means it's bundled in with your plan, same carrier, so the claims, when Cigna pays the claims, they automatically adjudicate the stop loss. We quoted a $400,000, a $500,000, and a $750,000 attachment point, which means if you had large claims that met the $400,000 threshold, which you have currently, then everything above the $400,000 would be covered by that stop loss premium. And so the county would cap its losses on that claimant, that one specific claimant, at the $400,000. The $500,000 attachment point works exactly the same way. It's just moving that needle up $100,000. So in order to make decisions like this, we run what we refer to as a Monte Carlo analysis, and our Gallagher actuary team prepared that type of analysis. It runs a simulation, like 1,000 simulations of 2 million claims or something like that. Don't hold me to the specific numbers, but it runs that simulation and it says what the statistical likelihood is of a particular level of claim being reached. And we think, it's our opinion, based on the math and the statistical likelihood and unlikelihood of claims, that you would be good to move to 500 or 750,000 in attachment point. And I can get into the details of how that would affect, from a statistical standpoint. Obviously that's looking historically and across a lot of different entities, not just Rutherford County's claims. And it's definitely not a certainty of future risk, right? But it at least gives us something to benchmark how y'all are doing versus those statistical numbers, and then how we might predict in a model that you would run. So happy to get into more detail than that, but we feel comfortable with that recommendation based on your rolling 12 months of large claimants. We track large claimants at the $150,000 mark. Cigna prepares a report on a regular basis, gives that to us and to the county, and you had, in terms of claimants that hit the 500,000 or the 750,000 in the last rolling 12, as a snapshot example for you, you only had one. That was a very large claim. It's like a over $2 million claim, but it was an acute situation, so we don't expect recurrence of that particular claim. I won't get into what it was, but just we don't expect recurrence.
Questions? Seeing none, this requires a roll call vote because we're talking about money. I'll need a motion and a second, please. We have a motion. Is that a proper motion, Susan? Excellent. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a second.
Mayor, may I say one other thing I failed to say?
Yes, that might be appropriate.
Yes, I think there is something appropriate.
I sense a chill in the room.
Well, I think it's appropriate to think about when we move the needle up, that if you have a statistically unlikely bad year, meaning what I mean by that is if you trended to the 90% threshold and you had the maximum number of claimants we would predict for a 90% experience, then you're risking more loss of revenue or money that you pull into the plan out of premium dollars. And if you start to see that, happening, if we had like a really bad run for some reason, you really should be looking at this in kind of 3 to 5 year blocks. I think that would be the wisdom, because it's really hard to pull the number back down to a different attachment point, because the carriers are all going to see the same claims that we're seeing, right? That would make us want to do that. So I just want to make sure y'all know that. I don't feel uncomfortable at 750 based on the math, but 500 is more conservative. Yes, sorry.
Hold on, Mr. Tudbini. Mary had her hand up first, and I want to recognize Mary. I'll get to you in just a second. Thank you, sir. Mary, you're recognized.
Okay, the reason being is the last statement on the thing, but if you run the numbers on the sheet, if we go to 750, we're saving $541,000 and some change. That's 3 people hitting between 400 and 750 before we get into our savings. You got to have 3 people hit over 4 to get to the 750 before we have lost our money. And I mean, I'm good for 5, but you're saving less. And I think we have the lesser number of people lives that we cover right now. Just with county general folks, the 1,359 people, we have a better handle on what is, you're going to have an acute. But if we get into the rolling of something that's going to constantly, but for a savings, and actually I run the numbers and it's $397 if we were still going to pay the $750 plus for the $400,000. So the savings, it would take 3 people to eat up the savings that we would have in the premiums is the reasoning for going to the 750.
You do have some gene therapies and different things that are starting to come into the market that are shifting things a little bit. That is a potential reason to watch a little bit. But to your point also, I think it's helpful to think about what types of claims would ever exceed $400,000 or $500,000 and especially fall in that $500,000 to $750,000 range. I mean, it is a quite unusual claimant that would be chronically hitting that, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. I mean, the statistical likelihood is one thing, but then the actual experience can be quite another. And we kind of try to look at 50% likelihood. What's 50% likely to happen? And that's because it's an even type of number. It doesn't unduly positively affect how we decide things, but it doesn't unduly negatively impact how we decide things. And the 50% mark, we would tend to think you might not have any claims at 750 based on the historical and running these simulations I'm talking about. But that's using a little bit old claims data, right? Because we're putting it into an engine that's churning and generating an answer based on older data. It's not current inflationary reflected, new therapies reflected. So there is a bit of a gamble, with any of this. Calculated risk is what it is. At the $500,000 mark, you're 50% likely to have one claim.
Mr. Tudbini, you're recognized.
I appreciate your caution. What I would be interested in is if we look back 5 years and get an average, and then we project out these 3 different scenarios into the future, which one saves the most money? Of course, we could hypothetically imagine anything going wrong, but I'm more interested in realistic, what do the past 5 years look like, projecting forward reasonably, the next 5 years being similar, which of these 3 scenarios saves the county the most money? If that's the 750, I'm all for 750. If it's the 500, I'm all for the 500.
Your attachment point before, when you had the school system involved with you, was that larger number. I think it was 750 or 700, 750. So any 5-year historical is going to include claimants that would have been on the school system side. So we're a little bit handicapped in that way to just look only at history. And while I like where your logic is going, I think from a broker perspective, our recommendation from the actuaries who live in this world all the time would be definitely to use simulations across multiple entities, different geographic locations, more of a higher level analysis that because of the fact that we can't pinpoint what types of diagnoses you might have in your population.
As I said, I appreciate your caution.
Yeah. It's all calculated risk, right? It's what your committee feels comfortable taking. As we stated, our recommendation would be that you do bump it up. I think it's a question in the discretion of the commission of whether it's 500 or 750.
Well, one last thing too, though. Even if in the next 5 years it ends up not being perfect, there's still the 5 years after that could be recovered. So a 10-year period of time. Anyway, I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you very much.
Lois, did you have a question?
I have a commentary about it. I would prefer the $500,000 level. The reason for that being, while it's always a good idea to look backwards and see what's happened, large claims are extremely difficult to predict. And the past is not necessarily a good predictor of the future when it comes to large claims that would hit a stop-loss level. They kind of pop up when you least expect them. And we do keep an eye out and look at the claims as they come in and watch for diagnosis and stuff, but that still doesn't tell you exactly what you're looking at. The $500,000 level still saves us nearly $250,000. So it's a good place to start. And if it goes well and we think we're doing well and the plan's doing well, then at some point in the future we could move it up to 750. But Marissa makes a really good point in that if we move it to 750 and then a couple years from now we go, ouch, and want to go back to 500,000, the stop-loss carriers are looking at the same things we're looking at and what caused us to reflect that way. And so it would be very difficult or maybe more costly to move it back to 500,000 than it is this year.
So, Lois, let me ask you a question. Are you telling this committee and the chair that it's easier to move from 500 to 750 than it is from 750 to 500?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. Mr. Smith, did you have a question? Any further questions or comments? We have a motion for 750. Mr. Smith, you are recognized. I knew you had a question. You just didn't know you did.
I don't have a question. I have a statement.
Please.
Our current budget draft is built on 500,000.
That's a relevant point, Mr. Smith. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We have a motion for 750 and a second.
Sorry, sir. Who was the second on the 750, motion for 750?
I believe it was Commissioner Phillips.
Thank you.
So we can do one of two things, committee. We can amend the motion, or we can vote the motion up or down, and if it fails, we can then make a motion for a second solution. So that's where we're at. So the chair's at the will of the committee.
Third solution is to remove my second.
Indeed, there's a third solution. So are you removing your second? Okay, so we have a motion now without a second. The chair needs a second before we can move forward. Motion fails without a second. That puts us in the posture of not having a motion, ladies and gentlemen. We have a motion for approve a stop loss of 500,000. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Susan, if you will call the roll. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Boyd? Yes. Suzette Couples? Yes. Mike Curtis? Yes. Brian Gaither? Yes. Mary Hickerson? Yes. Lois Miller? Yes. Commissioner McAdoo? Yes. Commissioner Phillips? Yes. Michael Smith? Yes. Steve Spence? Yes. Sonia Stevenson? Yes. Eric Tutobeni? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And committee, let me just tell you something. That's exactly how the process is supposed to work. So thank you very much. I mean, I didn't have a dog in the fight, but that's what we do. We examine the facts. Medicare Advantage Plan, Molly Howell. Item 9.
We touched on that a bit already, just that we don't have those 2025 rates yet from Cigna, but when we do, we will advise you all and let you know.
Okay.
So if we're ready to move on to number 9.
We are, and I said number 9 a minute ago, but now we're talking about flexible spending account discussion. Thank you.
Yes. So on the, for this item, as we're looking ahead to next year when we're going to be putting out our RFPs for our ancillary products, we're going through our plan documents, making sure that we have everything in line with how we're wanting to move forward on those. So for the flex spending account, specifically the healthcare flex spending account, there's currently no time limit on the number of years that a carryover can roll forward. So when an employee enrolls in a healthcare flex spending account, our plan allows for them to roll up to the IRS maximum allowable over to the next year, the next plan year, if they're not enrolled in this, if they haven't enrolled in the benefit the next year, they can still carry those carryover funds over to spend in the next plan year. So right now, our plan allows that to be carried over year after year after year, even if the employee doesn't select another enrollment in a healthcare flex spending account. And what that means is that they can have any amount up to the IRS maximum allowable rollover, whether that's 1 cent, 10 cents, 50 cents, $100. That, while that account is still active, the county is paying a fee on monthly of $3.10. So the Insurance and Risk Management Department is recommending that we put a time limit on the number of years that that carryover can roll over. If we limit that to 1 year after that first year of carryover, that would allow the funds to be forfeited and the county would no longer be responsible for paying the monthly fee for accounts that have rolled over for 3, 4, 5 years and may only have $1 in them. So that is the county's recommendation on the, or not the county's recommendation, the Insurance and Risk Management Department's recommendation on the carryover time limit.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Are there any questions? I assume that concluded that report, correct?
There's one additional tack on down here at the bottom as far as the IRS maximum allowable carryover. The IRS does update that every year. Last year it was $610. This year it's $640. So instead of having to come back to the committee every year and say, can we meet the IRS maximum there, we're looking to, for approval to be able to just automatically raise that limit to the IRS maximum.
Questions? Yes, Sonia, you're recognized.
So I have I have 2 questions. One, does the insurance department notify these employees that they have excess money in that flexible spending account, or do y'all leave it up to the employee?
We sent out a letter this earlier this month notifying employees with a carryover balance that they have this balance available to them. Health Equity, our flex spending account vendor, also sends out a reminder every fall for anybody who has a balance in their account. Yes.
Then my next question would be, if the purpose of doing this is because the insurance department is paying a fee, is there any way to take that fee out of the unused funds as opposed to closing, as opposed to not to let it, the answer is no. Okay, Susan said. Okay.
Thank you, Sonia.
Well, I have one other question. Is it an all or none? So like, could we choose to say anybody who has less than, $50 in this account, it'll be forfeited if they, don't utilize it year over year, but anything over $50, it stays until they're notified? Or is it just an all or none thing? Either we forfeit it all or?
We do have the option to set a minimum amount to carry over, yes.
Thank you, Sonia. Any further questions regarding the discussion on flexible spending accounts? Seeing none, we'll accept. Thank you. We're now to item 10, other business. Is there any other business before the committee? Well, you don't have that on my agenda, my cheat sheet, Susan. I follow my little cheat. I know, but I follow my cheat sheet religiously. Chairman Phillips will testify to the importance of a cheat sheet. So I've been instructed that we need a motion. Is this a roll call or a voice vote?
I would think it's a roll call since it involves funds, monies.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we do need see how important a cheat sheet is, Commissioner? So we need a motion and a second on this report, please.
Question, how many people are we talking about, and from experience from years ago before I retired, there were a lot of people that would keep money in their flexible spending account and go ahead and pay deductibles and those kind of things so that they could accumulate money year after year for some type of major expense at some point in time. So what those people need to do is just go ahead and spend that money for deductibles and those kind of things and get it out of there. That's the thought.
I'm getting a big head shaking no back behind you, Commissioner Phillips. So can we pause for just a second and bring Ms. Combs-Smith forward? If you don't mind, do you mind? My apologies, but this was an adamant shaking of the head. I'm just fortunate to see it.
I just didn't want everybody getting confused. I think we're thinking of HSA with that. Flexible spending account under the FSA rules, you can only roll forward the annual cap, and you will lose the money if it does not get used. HSA is different because it's a savings vehicle. An employee could long-term build a cash value. They could invest that money. It is a very different structure. People confuse them very often. I don't know why the IRS had to call them such similar names. Happens all the time. But I didn't want getting off track on that item. So flexible spending accounts is the appropriate item for you all at an FSA, and that is capped at $640. When we do enrollment meetings, we often encourage groups to, the employees that sit in those enrollment meetings will say things like, don't really bank on more than like roughly $500, because that's an easy number for people to remember. It's technically $640, but if I plan on every year I'm going to kick $500 forward, then I can't really ever get in trouble. So that's why we recommend it that way. It's an easy number for people to remember.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
My apologies, Commissioner. You may continue.
I have no idea what she just said, but
well, it was important. She said it was. So,
getting back to flexible spendings, so we don't carry an unlimited amount over year after year after year after year. Is that right or wrong?
That's correct. They're giving you a big yes sign. So what we were just referring to, the IRS maximum allowable carryover amount limits the amount of money you can carry over. So this year, 24 into 25, correct me if I'm wrong, it'll be 640, 24 into 25, or 610, 24 into 25?
Ms.
Combs-Smith,
you either need to come to the mic or not speak.
But any amount over that maximum carryover amount will be forfeited.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's my working off the hip here, but I believe it's $640 for 2024, and in 2025 we're likely to see it increase again, but we have not seen that come out. That's usually published later in the year. My memory is in 23 it was $610. And because it shifts, but it doesn't always necessarily go up, I think they have the ability to pull it back down as well, and that's part of the logic in kind of just teaching people $500, because that's so easy to remember.
Thank you. Just stay put for a second, if you don't
While
mind.
you're up here.
Exactly.
I got the impression during this conversation that people carried over year after year after year an unlimited amount. You're saying that they do not.
Correct. They do not.
Thank you for that clarification. It's an important point. Mr. Curtis, you're recognized.
As a longtime user of the FSA account, in both flexible and earlier when I had younger kids in child care, we spent it all every year, well ahead of the end of the calendar year. It's a very useful tool for the employee, and yeah, I'd be hard pressed to vote against any changes to it.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I think I want to point out the purpose of this isn't to eliminate or change that an employee can't carry over money to the flexible spending. What we're running into is the county has what's called a fiduciary fund. You don't vote it on at the budget, but it's a fund we hold flexible spending account money in. But we're holding money from people who are no longer alive, who are no longer working with the county, and we're holding like a penny or 50 cents. And so while we've tried to contact these people or their estates and try to get them to spend it and stuff like that, This would be for somebody, an employee without an active FSA election. So this would be, I leave employment today, I have a year to spin that out, but we don't want to carry a 50-cent balance for the next 20 years for an employee who may have gone on to work at another employer is really, from the finance office, that's our intent when we have a lot of these penny, 50 cents, $1 balances, and then we're paying a fee to maintain that. I'd rather just absorb the money back to us. If the employee comes back and wants their penny, I'll just give them a penny. I think that's the intent of the, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, Molly, but to me, that was the intent of the resolution or the plan change.
There are different rules around if an employee leaves employment with Rutherford County, then the claim by and spend by dates do change, and that amount does not carry over year after year. This would only be if an employee remains an employee, benefit eligible employee of Rutherford County.
But they would switch to another
Yes, but they
HSA
don't
plan,
re-enroll.
Which is really an investment vehicle, which is something totally different than this. But that's the issue I think we're having, is we're carrying really, really small balances for years and years and years, and we're losing a lot of money on that, I think, is the trying to clean that up.
Sonia, did you want to? That's what I was just confirming. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Eric Todabini.
How difficult would it be just to liquidate those accounts when someone is no longer employed? And when I say liquidate, I mean give it to them.
So I can't, it's not ours. It's in a fiduciary fund, so I can't tell that employee you have to take this, and we just have to hold it indefinitely because we're a fiduciary of that money, and we just have to hold it. If the employee,
It can't be dispersed to them?
well, I mean, if the employee leaves,
And
there's
write
some
them a check.
options. If they pass away, there's some options, but if I switch to a health savings account here, I can carry up to 640, and it just sits there. I can't force them to take it out because it's a tax advantage account.
I understand that. I'm just curious if there's a way, because if they're no longer an employee, if they can just be
But I think
handed over to them.
I think Molly was trying to. I said it wrong the first time. It's for the main problem we're having. Then is for a current employee who switches a plan that's no longer, or they no longer have an FSA election. They're still employed here.
Oh,
Maybe they switch
still
to an
employed.
HSA account. We're still a fiduciary of that money, and I
Gotcha.
can't make them take it.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about someone who no
I
longer
was,
is
and Molly
employed.
corrected me.
Okay.
To clarify, this is not an unclaimed account.
No.
Thank you. Lois?
It's also very difficult to return the money because it goes into the FSA account on a pre-tax basis, and we can't take out pre-tax money and return it to an employee that way.
Thank you for that clarification. Sonia, did you want to? If you're going to speak, got to have the microphone. Are you going to speak?
No, Lois said what I was going to say.
And so, Commissioner Phillips, this is, they don't have an unlimited amount that they can carry over right now. Is it for an unlimited amount of time for an active employee who's no longer contributing to that? They've switched to a different benefit. So the amount is still set by IRS, but the time that they were able to carry it over was set in our plan, and that's what we're trying to reduce to just 1 calendar year after they have elected a different type of benefit.
My understanding is better. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
With that understanding, the recommendation of the Risk Management Committee, I move to approve this recommendation.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? We have a second from Mr. Smith. Do we have any further questions? Mr. Gaither, did you raise your hand?
I do. Do you think some of these issues with these accounts will be addressed with the notification that went out? I know we had a couple of people in our department, they just weren't aware they had the funds, and so they're happy to get the card and spend the money.
That was the intention of it, so I'm glad that they are acting on it. We have had calls back from an employee who had 38 cents in her FSA account that was carrying over year after year, and she called us and said it would be more trouble than it's worth to go out, get the card, and then spend this. Can't you just forfeit it? So some employees, I'm certainly hoping that they will take advantage of those funds because they are theirs, or it's available to them to use, but it won't take care of all of the cases that we're trying to address here.
So are we going to put a minimum balance on this, or we're going to eliminate them completely?
The recommendation, as we've presented it to the committee, limited the number of years that these accounts would carry, that these amounts would carry forward. That's what we brought today.
Mary, did you want to say something?
Yes, sir. I think we just need to stick with doing, for the next plan year, or ever how you've got it, doing the 1 year. Because if you set a minimum and say you set it at $50, it cost us $37.10 for that year to cover that $50. So I'm thinking, in the 38 cents, there's no telling how many $37.10 we spent to keep her 38 cents in the till. So I think we're better off to say it's forfeited after ever how it's worded exactly, the plan year, all year 24, you got to December 31st of 25 to spend it. I think that makes better sense, because if we're going to spend $37.10 to cover something, let's make it viable and nothing to keep carrying over. So I think we stick with the 1 year.
Further questions? We have a motion from Commissioner Phillips, and we have a second from Michael Smith, and we have another question from Eric Tudabini.
So if I understand what you were just saying, after 1 year, if they haven't claimed it, and of course notice would be sent out, they would forfeit it. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you.
Before we have any other questions, we're going to vote. Seriously, if there are any more questions or comments, we'll take them now. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Suzette Couples? Mike Curtis?
Yes.
Brian Gaither? Yes. Mary Hickerson? Yes. Lois Miller? Yes. Commissioner McAdoo? Yes. Commissioner Phillips? Michael Smith? Yes. Steve Spence? Yes. Sonia Stevenson? Yes. Eric Tutobeni?
Thank you. Any other business from the committee? Seeing none, our next meeting is May 20th, 2024, and without objection, we stand adjourned.